back in 19. So he came to New Zealand when he was very young. And through the generations, we first started in wine merchants and then developed into selling finer spirits from all around the world. And very much so, my father was behind our huge growth in our single malt whiskies and his passion, especially for bourbon. So I'm very glad that we're both online today and able to host everyone. So thanks, guys, and I'll pass it over to T.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Liz and Araha, for the introduction. Obviously, I'm Anthony. I'm Product and Marketing Assistant Manager at Glengarry, so sort of working with our suppliers day to day, and events sort of come under that one quite a lot. So you've got James Barber online, and his company is the importer of Michters Whiskey, and I think we probably first spoke about doing this tasting about 7 or 8 months ago. And it was actually surprisingly, I mean, it took a while to get the bourbon here, but actually quite easy to set up with the team from Michters jumping on it and kindly sending us over an allocation and some tasting bottles for this. So won't ramble on too long. Just as we've already said, just throw your questions in the chat, anything you want to say, and I'll relay it to John Shutt, who's going to host for us today. So I'll throw you over. We'll get started, John?
Nice. Thanks, Steve. And guys, give me a second. Let me just pull up this presentation. I promise that it's going to be exciting and fun. Don't look ahead. I didn't have this thing prompted to go yet. 1 second. Yeah, and guys, look, I've been to 1,000 tastings, and I'm convinced either the person talking is just trying to sound smart or just bore you to death. And that's not what I'm trying to do here tonight. I want you guys to have fun because bourbon and American whiskey is fun. I always learn way better when I'm having fun. So this is wide open. Please ask questions. I'm here for you. Nothing's off limits. I want to answer everything, every question you guys have about Michters, about Kentucky, whatever you guys have for me, let me have it. I get way too excited. It's 10 p.m. I have a brisket on. I have fireworks going off in the background. There's nothing more American than that right now. So it's perfect time to drink some bourbon and some American rye. But just real quick for Michters, we are family owned. And what that really means is, we have one goal, and that is to make the greatest American whiskey, period. At Michters, it really does start and end with quality. And that's not just our whiskeys. That's not just our grains. It's not just our distillery. It is our personnel. It is our importers. It's our accounts. It's our fans. It's our consumers. It's everything. Everything at Michters starts and ends with quality. And that's what, when I first came to Michters, I heard, well, they're family owned. What's that mean? Is the family off in New York and then Kentucky kind of does the operation and they don't really get involved? They're very involved, very passionate. And again, our goal is to make the greatest American whiskey, period. Okay. And again, like I said, I've been to so many tastings that I'm like, is this guy ever going to shut up and let us drink this whiskey? So guys, let's get right into it. Let's get our US1 single barrel rye. Get that prompted, get that in your glass. And I'm going to give you a big old Kentucky cheers. All right. I'll give you a little
all right,
time.
We're starting with the straight rye, are we?
Wait, do you want bourbon?
We've got, glass one, we've got Kentucky straight bourbon. But
I can't count, Anthony, these slides. I'm from Kentucky. I can't count very well. I'm sorry about that. Let's go with
if you think we should go rye, we should go straight to rye.
Guys, let's do our US1 single barrel rye. Let's go there.
All right, so that's the last two, everyone.
And while you're getting that ready, nosing it, I'll give you some background on this whiskey because, I'm born and raised from Kentucky. So you're talking to the real deal. This is not a job. This is my passion. It's my blood. This is my story of where I'm from. And I had bourbon when I was a young kid. I was 10 years old when I had my first bourbon. And I loved it back then. Dangerous. I love it today too. But one thing I never really talked about or really experienced was rye whiskey. And we will talk about our rye, but this US1 rye, it's single barrel. It's 42.4% ABV. All these first four whiskeys that we're going to be tasting, average age is between 5 and 7 years old. at Michters, we're bottling by taste, not exactly by an age statement. You know, the Scotch guys typically do the age statements. Most American guys really don't really focus on that. It's more about the taste. You know, that 5-year-old barrel may be ready to go, or it may need the full 7 years to meet that Michters standard and to actually, you know, be bottled. You know, this rye whiskey, and keep in mind, guys, the rye category in American whiskey, it's very, very small. It's 10% of the overall production of bourbon. So in comparison, very, very small category. But the majority of the rye that's out there is actually from a distillery in Indiana. So we call our rye whiskey a Kentucky style. And what does that mean? It's because our mash bill, you know, at least 51% rye, and you can call yourself a rye whiskey. You can have 100% rye in your mash bill and call yourself a rye whiskey. The Indiana ryes are known for a higher rye mash bill, 95%, up to 100%. We got a Kentucky style that has at least 51% rye, but it's also got corn and malted barley. And it's just like food. Rye is very, very spicy. So when you have something very, very spicy in terms of food, when you add sweet to it, it helps to create this really nice balance. So it's not a very one-dimensional rye whiskey. You're not getting just one type of grain flavor. This really has a nice balance that really takes you with that rye spice. You get some of that, but you also get this nice balance from that corn sweetness and also that nuttiness from the malted barley. Okay? Are you guys enjoying the rye whiskey? I see 4 of you, so I hope you're enjoying.
Like, I'll speak to everyone and I'll say, yes, I am enjoying that for a Saturday afternoon in the middle of winter.
Well, guys, keep enjoying that. And let me walk you through the history. And usually this is like the boring part in the presentation where it's like, oh, God, here we go. But I have a question for you. I love trivia, okay? So who can tell me what all of these things have in common, okay? George Clooney, Johnny Depp, Jennifer Lawrence, Abraham Lincoln, Pizza Hut, and Michters. Anyone out? First, whoever gets it right gets a prize. I'll fly it down to New Zealand myself. I'll find something nice for you. Anybody out there know?
Are they all from Kentucky?
Winner gets the prize. Good job. They're all from Kentucky. But guys, George Clooney, can you believe that? I can't believe it. So the funny thing is, Michters is in Kentucky, but the story doesn't start in Kentucky. It starts back in 1753 in Schaefferstown, Pennsylvania. Okay, we're not in Kentucky yet. 1753, John Shank, a Swiss farmer, was actually distilling on the grounds there. And throughout the course of history, the distillery changed hands a number of times. Through the 1800s, it switched over to Abraham Baumberger. You go through Prohibition, the worst time in American history. And then maybe Donald Trump, that's the worst, I don't know. Don't talk politics and drink. And then you get to the 1950s, right? And that's where the name Michters is born, okay? Lou Foreman, the owner at that time, had 2 sons, Michael and Peter. And he was looking to rebrand. And he said, you know what? Michael and Peter, that's how you get Michters, okay? So it wasn't until the 1950s that name was actually born. I call that 1950s marketing. Some people think it's a Pennsylvania Dutch name or German or Swiss name. It's 1950s marketing, okay? You get to the 1980s, specifically 1989. The 70s and 80s were a really, really hard time for American distilleries. It was the first time that Americans really turned their backs on their own native spirit. They were looking global and they stopped drinking local. You know, they were tired of driving Chevy, Ford, and Dodge. They wanted to drive Mercedes, BMW, and Saab. It all switched. They turned their backs on bourbon. They were drinking imported vodka. They were drinking French wine. And it was a tough time. So in 1989, Michters, Pennsylvania filed for bankruptcy. They walked away, said, it's worth nothing, we're out of here. Lock the doors, see ya. Well, luckily, our president, Joe Malioco, who was a sales rep in New York during the 70s, actually knew this brand, and he sold it. And when he found out they had filed for bankruptcy, he acquired the abandoned trademark. And he wanted to resurrect this brand back to prominence. And his first dilemma was, well, do I go back to Pennsylvania where the roots of the brand are, or do I go to Kentucky that's known for making over 95% of the world's bourbon? Ultimately, Joe decided Kentucky was the place to go. Kentucky is great for a lot of things. It's my favorite state. It's the best state in the United States. Some would disagree with that, but I don't. But it's so perfect for whiskey. We have this limestone shelf, this rock that Kentucky's built on. It filters our water naturally. It removes iron. Iron is something you do not want when you're making whiskey. It's rich in calcium. We have all 4 seasons here in Kentucky, a really hot summer, a really cold winter. The people here, this is bourbon Mecca. This is where it really starts and ends for bourbon. So Joe decided Kentucky was the place. Today, we've got 2 distilleries here in Kentucky and a farm and warehouse operation about an hour away from Louisville, Kentucky, in Springfield, Kentucky. We've gone through 3 phases of production. We're very transparent about this. In the 90s, when Joe acquired the abandoned trademark, he didn't acquire barrels. What he did, he actually went to Kentucky distilleries who were dying. They were just like, please buy something, sir. Please come taste this one, taste this one. And so Joe was going through tasting all these amazing barrels that were older, that weren't selling. No one was drinking older bourbons back then. No older ryes, forget about it. Joe was picking these barrels that he loved, and they were rich and viscous. And one day when he had enough money, he wanted to make whiskeys just like that. That was phase 1. Phase 2, we went to one Kentucky distillery and we said, look, we still don't have enough money for a distillery, but we know what we want to make. Here's our recipes. Here's our barrel specs. Here's our yeast. Everything about this was us. Joe says it best. He says, we were like a chef cooking in someone else's kitchen. That's phase 2. You get to phase 3, which is where we are today. And I mentioned we have 2 operating distilleries. We'll talk about those a little bit more in depth, but that's really where we are from 1753 all the way through a pandemic to 2021. That's where we are today. Any questions about the history? I told you I get excited. I hope I'm not scaring you.
No questions yet, but I did just ask to see if many people had actually been to Kentucky before, and there is 1 or 2, mostly just Glengarry staff though. It seems once we start working here, we all just want to start visiting distilleries around the world. So I definitely know Jack has. So. It's funny. I've been to New Zealand, and I actually find a lot of like similarities. And it's not in me per se, but in Kentucky, we always say we've never met a stranger. And honestly, not kissing your all's butts today. I'm really not. It's too late for all that to be kissing butts right now. But honestly, some of the nicest people, some of the most genuine, sincere people I've met on the planet, and I've been around the world. I really do see similarities there. There's also this passion for quality. One thing I hear in almost every single market that I open, and I think we're exporting to over 64 export markets, and my job is to watch over all of those. I always hear, well, this is a Scotch market. And yeah, I disagree. I think it's a quality market. And the problem is a lot of people fear what they don't know, and they know the younger commercial stuff. What's happened now is these distilleries in Kentucky have realized, wait a second, let's not just send our young stuff over, let's send some of our good stuff over. And that's what we do. We send every single product that we distribute in the United States, we export it. And I'm very, very proud of that. We don't treat New Zealand, Australia, or China, Italy, doesn't matter. We don't treat them like stepchildren. We treat them like a state. And that's something I really love about this brand and this company. Okay? Good stuff, guys. All right. Hope I don't scare you. I'll be quick here. Dan McKee, our master distiller. Dan he's amazing. I'm so proud that I know him. And Dan is the man. Dan the man. He's the most humble person I've ever met. But also very, very genuine, sincere. Even though he doesn't have time, he will make time to answer any question and to make the most complex things about distilling even easy enough for me to understand, which is a stretch. That's hard to do. And Dan is just, his job is to make sure that day-to-day operation of our distillery, those grains that are coming in, those non-GMO grains, US1 grade, the absolute best corn, rye, and barley that you can purchase is coming in, and it's going to meet that Michters quality every single time. Dan's very much on the front end, making sure that white dog, that's more like a Kentucky accent right there if you couldn't tell, that white dog that goes into the barrel is going to be its absolute best. And it's going to actually have character, a bouquet, a nose, even before it goes into the barrel and pulls all that flavor and color from that barrel. So he's very much on the front end. Okay, so that's Dan. At that point, once that barrel is filled, it changes hands to the backside, and now you're in the maturation. You got to go into the warehouse. And Andrea Wilson is our master of maturation. We call her Bourbon Mom, master of maturation. You see what I did there, Mom? And so Andrea's job is to make sure that barrel. Ellen's got it wrong, but
I don't know. But you know, her job is making sure that barrel is going to mature and become that Michters standard quality that we're looking for: rich, viscous, flavorful, warming, not aggressive, warming. Very, very different in terms of, you know, how a finish, you know, all the way down. We've all had that big old burn down your throat. Every product you taste today, even the barrel strength rye, it might be powerful. It shouldn't be aggressive. It should not fight you on the way down. That's really Andrea's job to make sure that doesn't happen. She's one of 5 chemical engineers that we have on staff. Truly one of the most respected people in the entire industry. And I've learned more from Andrea in the last 4 years than I have in my entire 15-year career. She is that talented. Her background in wood science really gives us the advantage of knowing the effects of different types of woods, these species of woods that are unusually, you know, they're expensive, they're hard to harvest, hard to work with, but the effect they're going to have on that whiskey for a better experience for our consumer. Okay, so that's Dan and Andrea. We're so lucky to have them. Dan on the front side, Andrea really on the back side there. Okay, I know I'm talking too much. Let's get right to that bourbon, y'all. Let's go. We're gonna get that US 1 bourbon in your glass.
John, I just got one question. You haven't mentioned Willie Pratt. Did you ever meet him?
Absolutely, and very important.
Tell us about him, because he was quite integral to the success of the distillery, wasn't he?
Yeah, the original master distiller of Michters. Over 50 years of experience in distilling. Unfortunately, Willie passed away early this year. And again, you know, one thing that I never take for granted is, you know, I told you, I'm not very smart, right? And I'm not a distiller and I don't make this whiskey, but I've been so lucky to be around the people that do make it. And Willie was just another one of those people. You know, I mentioned Michters is a family-owned company, and that's not just some facade. It's everything we do, including our meetings, our innovation meetings, our allocate, everything about it. And Willie was one of those people who he was just this normal guy. You know, he wasn't putting on this show and, you know, selling snake oil. It was real. And what's really amazing is when Michters really fired up in phase 1 and phase 2, you know, it was really Willie's inspiration that went behind every whiskey that we produced. He actually went through and was doing custom filtration. He did 32 different iterations of each of our whiskeys to make sure he knew exactly what was going to make that whiskey taste its absolute best. The guy was just this unbelievable guy. Again, almost like Dan, there's a similarity between Dan and Willie, and even Pam Heilman. You know, Pam Heilman, you know, followed Willie, and Pam was the first female master distiller since Prohibition. I mean, we're proud of Willie, but I mean, God, again, Pam Heilman, she ran Jim Beam, the largest bourbon distillery in the world. Joe actually went to Pam and said, look, if you could build a distillery from the ground up, cost be damned, would you come work for us? Would you do it? Pam said, absolutely. And that's how Dan actually got involved. She brought Dan from Jim Beam. And again, that legacy kind of just goes on. But again, sorry I ramble. Sorry I talk too much. I apologize. But to me, it's just so damn cool that we have this amazing all-star team, excluding me, at Michters, who in the end, we're all from different backgrounds. I'm from Blanton's. For 10 years, I ran Blanton's international sales and marketing. You know, Willie was from Brown-Forman, Andrea's Diageo. In the end, our goal is quality, to make the greatest American whiskey possible. That's it. And that's what's really awesome about Michters. Okay. I hope that answers your question. The guy's awesome. He's a living legend. Thank you for bringing him up. He is sadly missed. Guys, US 1 bourbon. Have you poured it yet? I bet you have, because I just talked for like an hour, right? All right, US 1 bourbon, 45.7%, small batch, right? By the way, 5 to 7 years. First 4 whiskeys we taste, 5 to 7 years old, okay? Small batch. And for those of you who are maybe newer to American whiskey, if you see small batch, it's all marketing. Don't believe it, okay? It's all smoke and mirrors. There is no legal definition for what small batch really means, okay? This distillery will do 500 barrels together, and that's a small batch. These guys will do 100. These guys will do 1,000. We do 20 at Michters. Why is that so good, John? Why is that so important? Well, if you have one off barrel out of 20 in your batch, if you have one bad barrel, it's 5% of the overall taste profile. You're going to taste it. What do you mean, John? Well, if you have a bad barrel that shouldn't be in that batch, you can't blend out the flaw. You can't blend out the green, the astringency. You can't blend it out. That's why we call our small batch bourbon a true small batch bourbon. I hope that makes sense. The thing I love, and guys, I never give tasting notes. So if you're wanting me to say, oh, do you smell the Manuka honey in here? You're not going to get it because everyone's different. I think that's also smoke and mirrors. I don't believe it. As long as you don't say asteroid dust or moon crystals, guess what? You're right. 200 known flavors in American white oak. You're going to be right. And you are your own expert anyway. You are right. I don't give tasting notes. I give experiences. Whenever I taste my US 1 bourbon, no matter where I am, if I'm in Christchurch, if I'm in Auckland, if I'm in, it doesn't matter, Indiana, don't go there. I feel like I'm home. And that's what this bourbon really does for me. When I look for a great bourbon, I'm looking for not too much of one thing. It's not just vanilla and it falls off a cliff. I want this right here. I want steady up and down all the way. I want that finish to go down, give me that nice Kentucky hug all the way down into my belly. That's what I'm looking for, okay? And that's our US 1 bourbon. Any questions about the US 1 bourbon?
Yeah, we've got a couple here, John. Just back on that small batch, producers looking to try and legalize that term or anything else in sort of the bourbon world at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, politics are politics, man. I think they're always trying to look to do something, change something, or it's hard because, to streamline that, to regulate that term, the TTB that's based here in the United States that governs all the rules and regulations, they do a really good job. And I think it gets to where you start to over-regulate. And one of the things that is a misconception about bourbon and American rye is, well, that's a working man's drink. It's not very sophisticated. That's get two old boys with the tractor. Guess what, guys? Bourbon and American rye are two of the most regulated spirits in the world. Lots of rules we have to follow. Lots of taxes we have to pay. Tariffs in Europe that we're still paying and nobody else is. I don't understand. But there's so much regulation already. I really hope it doesn't. That's my personal, it's not a Michters standpoint, but you can have a great small batch with 1,000 barrels. To me, it just reflects our goal. And saying 20 barrels, that means the discipline that has to be there for our sensory team of 27 people who all have to agree. And no matter what, Dan McKee can still say nope, because he has ultimate veto power. Every single barrel has to be that standard. Do some barrels not pass? Yep, they do. There's a small percentage that do not pass that test. That's why we are so, we're not the big guys. We're not the small guys. We're like the guys who are like towards the top of the middle tier size distilleries. And that really affords us the ability to maintain quality. We're not trying to make the most whiskey. We're trying to make the best whiskey. And so each barrel that comes out, we've done a really good job of maintaining continuity across our warehouses, across our distilling, to really replicate that quality standard that we're looking for every single time.
And the US 1 on the label, does that relate to sort of grain quality and things, does it?
Well, I mentioned US 1 corn, rye, and barley, which is in terms of the FDA, that is the highest grading scale of the actual grains themselves, the kernels themselves. It means it basically has the most hold. There's not a lot of bits and pieces and moisture content, all that boring stuff. It also reflects and goes back to 1753 when Michters, Pennsylvania, Shanks at that time was actually the first U.S. distilling company. And no, that wasn't modern day Michters today, but that's that heritage that we have, that those roots that we won't let die because we think it's so awesome. Our history here in America is a snapshot compared to a lot of countries around the world. When I'm walking down the streets of Venice, I'm just like, yeah, how old is this place? Athens, Greece? Are you kidding me? And then you think about it, whiskey's been there from the very beginning for us. From the colonies, when we ran from the British, we ended up in Pennsylvania, ran from taxes. I mean, it's been here throughout everything. So to me, to look at and put 1753 on that label every time before the U.S. was the U.S., I think that's something that we don't want lost throughout the sands of time, basically.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Good stuff.
How's everyone find that bourbon? It's pretty awesome. It's great to sort of have one in the market that's at the real percentage as well. Not watered down to 40.
Yeah, there's a lot of, it's strange. There's a lot of brands, and I've noticed that, I've spent more time in Australia, but, going through there, you see brands that I know are usually higher ABV in the US, but then in Australia, I think it's taxes, obviously, but I mean, that's just, again, that's something we're not going to do. We don't cut corners. Nothing is cut. We measure 5 times and cut once. It's just something we're not going to do.
Do you go through and try those ones when you see them at 40%?
Have I?
When you see those ones that are sort of watered down for our market, do you try them?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? I mean, there's, it's one thing I love. I've never been told by anybody at Michters, my boss, the vice president, Matt, the son of Joe, he's never said, hey, you can't drink anything but Michters, It's healthy. It's healthy to try and to taste your competitive set. It's always great to see listen, I'm from Kentucky. I wear 2 hats. I wear a Michters hat and I wear a Kentucky hat. And I've tried almost every bourbon I think there is, there's new ones popping up every single day, but there's nothing wrong with trying stuff. For me, I'm not the guy who's like, well, it's gotta be cask strength or nothing. I'm tough. I don't like, that's not me. I'm very seasonal when it comes to when I drink cask strength. I drink it in the winter. And guess what? I'm not drinking cask strength neat when it's 40 degrees out here in Kentucky. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to sweat. Mm-hmm. And also, guess what? Make a cocktail. If you don't like old fashions and Manhattans, something's wrong with you. I'm sorry, but they are delicious and they're awesome. So I'm sorry. So nothing wrong. And that's what something I love about American whiskey. And Michters especially, we embrace mixology, we embrace cocktails because we know and we believe that we're good enough of quality, that we're versatile enough to be great neat with a cube of ice, a drop of water, or in a premium cocktail. That's what I love. We're not telling you how to drink it. You don't have to wear a certain thing like a kilt to drink our stuff. You don't have to know everything. You just got to have fun and enjoy it and drink the way you like it.
Yeah, fair enough. We've got a few comments just mostly on how good it is. Cracking bourbon. Smooth and sweet, lovely drop. Everyone seems to love that rye, and have to admit that rye is pretty awesome. So definitely transfers me back to Kentucky, that's for sure.
So again, Kentucky hat on. Our US 1 rye. All my friends growing up said, don't drink rye. It's hot, it's spicy, you won't like it. And true story, hand on heart, the US 1 rye before I worked for Michters is what it actually changed my perception on the entire category. And then, now that I've tried a lot more, that Kentucky style really does stand out compared to nothing wrong with higher rye mash bills. It's fine. It's all good. It's just not our style, and it's not my style either. But thank you for saying that, guys. Thank you for the compliments. I appreciate that. I'll let Dan and Andrew know.
Yeah, I think we're sort of just starting to see a lot more ryes come into the market here as people sort of figure them out a bit more. It's kind of, as you've already said, you see rye, you're just like, oh, that's going to be a hot one, But as we're getting a few more and trying them, they sort of can't really keep them on the shelf very long. So, yeah, it's looking good.
Well, and one thing, and real quick, guys, I'm sorry, but this is, to me, is kind of interesting because T brought this up. But why is rye so small, right? Because prior to Prohibition, rye was actually the dominant spirit being made by American distilleries. It wasn't until the repeal of Prohibition that bourbon took off. And, for a long time, rye was slowly dying. I mean, it was like, beep, beep, beep. It's a dead category. And then what brought it back was, it's a fact. 2 things. Hollywood, a show called Mad Men. All these animals sitting there drinking old fashions, with rye whiskey. And also the top bartenders and mixologists around the world, they went back and looked at the books and said, an old fashioned actually calls for rye, not bourbon. A Manhattan is actually a rye-based cocktail. It's not, you can make a great old-fashioned with bourbon or Manhattan too, but the classic was rye. And so now there's this big resurgence. No one was ready for that. Joe, back in the 90s, was buying older ryes when nobody was buying them. And all of a sudden, Michters is ahead of the game, and we're not having to source that whiskey from Indiana. We're making our own. And that's what's really, really, call it timing, call it intuition, but that's really cool in terms of where we are today, because 15 years ago when I started, no one talked about rye. Today, everyone talks about rye. So it's really cool.
And in terms of mash bills for these last two whiskeys, do you guys release that sort of information or sort of keep it a bit close?
You know, it's always the answer I get a lot is, well, go ask Coca-Cola for the recipe, or go ask Kentucky Fried Chicken for the. Look, we are super transparent. We try to answer everything we possibly can. There are some things we hold near and dear to our heart. Mash bills, it's just one thing that we've decided we don't want to disclose. So I'm sorry, guys. But again, rye is a very much lower rye content, at least 51% rye, but not close to those 95 or 100% ryes out there.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Awesome.
Good stuff?
Not bad at all. Everyone's enjoying it.
Good. Keep enjoying, guys. And again, bring the questions, please. So quickly here, this is Shively. This is our main kind of workhorse distillery. We always laugh and say that this building won't win architectural awards. It looks like just an office park. But once you actually go inside, the building it was like designed for this ultimate distillery. It's perfect for our needs. This is where the majority of our processing, bottling, and distilling actually takes place. And we do have one on-site warehouse here that is 3 floors high. 3 floors high is an important number. We'll come back to that in a second. But like anything, like a car, you know, it's like, yeah, there's the car. What's under the hood? Let me see what you got. Let me see that engine, you know. So guess what? When you see a distillery, show me your still. I want to see what's going on, right? Here's what you should take away from this still. Number one is a column or continuous or coffee still to a pot still doubler on the right, okay? A lot of people are very familiar with pot-to-pot systems. The Scots, the Irish do it. Some other people do it. In America, that column still, that continuous still is really the more dominant type of still you're going to find here. It's just great at just producing and producing and producing. The one thing you should look at here is the fact that, again, I mentioned we don't cut corners at Michters. This still system was custom built by Vendome, another family-owned brassworks company based right here in Louisville, Kentucky. It's 100% copper. 5,000 kilos of copper. And why is that important, John? Why is that so good? Well, here's the deal. So you can cut corners by putting stainless steel up and down your doubler, up and down your still, your pipe. As long as your distillate comes in contact, your white dog comes in contact with copper at some point, that's all you need. We said no. 100% copper. Why is that so good, John? Keep telling me. Well, copper is really expensive. It's not as strong as stainless steel. You're going to have more repairs. It's going to damage more easily. But what copper does is it actually takes out, it removes sulfuric compounds you find in your distillate. It's things you don't want going into your barrel. The more copper contacts you get, the better and cleaner and more fragrant your distillate is going to be. And again, it's 100% copper. We've had other master distillers actually come through here, take a look at this and say, holy hell. Like, I mean, it's truly amazing because, you know, some guys do stainless steel and then they'll do copper trays. They'll do, copper piping. Very few, I'm not sure if I've ever seen one, don't quote me on that, but very few are 100% copper. Again, cost be damned, that's our approach, okay? Any questions about the still system? Cool. And for all you
nothing just yet.
Well, for all you geeky guys, and maybe this is over the top and I apologize, but if there's some geeks out there, I'm with you. But basically what happens is during distillation here, when it comes off the column, it's going to condense, that alcohol vapor condenses, and that's what's called low wine. And at that point, you're at about 64.5% ABV. It goes through the pot still doubler. It does the same thing. It recondenses into a vapor, into a liquid. That's called high wine. About 68, 69% ABV. That is the distillate that's going to go into the barrel. But we'll talk about one other rule in just a minute. Okay.
Yeah. How long do those 100% copper column stills last?
Yeah, so I guess we'll find out. I mean, this still system came online in 2015. Officially, we've been tweaking with it and tinkering with it in early 2015. Officially, August of 2015. Every distillery in Kentucky typically has this summer shutdown, and that's really where all distillation stops. You go in, you make all your repairs. The problem with that is now demand is so high that you're really having to, I mean, you're basically kind of cutting your nose off to spite your face here because you don't want to stop distilling. But you really have to do that. I don't answer a question I don't know the answer to. I can ask Vendome, get back to you guys, and definitely answer that question. I don't know. You know, one thing I have heard is you're going to get about 10 to 15 years out of copper. You'll get way more out of stainless steel, obviously. But again, the cost of these metals is so expensive, it still makes a big difference. That's a great question.
Cool. We've got another one here. It's just touching back on this when we're talking about a small batch. And you mentioned filtering out the floor. Are you referring to the veil of the yeast? And can you elaborate on that process at all?
Yeah. And that's a great question. Great. Yeah. So there are so many variables that can lead to that. It can be yeast, but like I said, we're Dan's one of those guys who can walk in that morning at 5 a.m. and just smell the air and say, something's wrong. Something's wrong. Stop operation. It's like that. You just get so used to it that something's off. Plus, we're testing in-house. Something else distilleries of our size just don't have the luxury of doing. We have our own lab in-house, chemical engineers actually working on our distillate and fermentation. It's usually the wood. And you have to think about that wood. Even though we buy from a cooperage who really has to replicate and repeat their quality many, many times, we actually buy from a separate lot. On average, our barrels are about $50 more expensive. And we'll talk about why that is. But the bottom line is you can't predict how that wood's going to behave. You can't predict, did we get all of the astringent tannins out of that green layer of wood, that wet layer of wood? You really can't predict what it's going to do. Where did it sit in the warehouse? Did it get too much heat? Not enough heat? All these variables can go into that. You can fill a barrel side by side. I've literally seen this happen. Side by side, they can go in the warehouse, and for some reason, one just does not mature like the other. It's really, really strange. Maybe it's because of the staves. Was the stave on this barrel from the top of the tree, the bottom of the tree? That's when it starts to kind of blow your mind. It's like, how big is the universe? Oh, it just keeps going, right? And that's what it's like with, what happened here? You have to be a detective, and good luck, because it's really, really difficult to really tell exactly what happened. Sorry I didn't answer your question, but that's really the truth. There's so many variables, it's impossible. Yeah,
when it comes to those staves and barrels, it kind of depends like how deep you want to delve. I know we've got one champagne grower champagne that we import to New Zealand, and they use barrels for some of their top cuvées, and each stave they can GPS locate exactly where it came from in the forest and things. And it's just like,
guess what?
Why? But then you understand once you try it.
Guess what, T? So can we, baby. So can we.
No.
We do. No, that's how crazy it really is. They GPS track the lots. So if something's wrong, guess what? You can trace it all the way back to what lot it was. Don't buy from there. That's what's really, really cool. And that's what I love, is the fact that, again, I make fun of Americans as much as I make fun of the Bogans in Australia or anywhere else. But I mean, honestly, guys, this is sophisticated, high-level stuff here. I mean, that's where we are. The Americans finally figured out it's quality, not quantity. That's what's changed. That whiskey you drank back in the 70s and 80s, if you're old enough to have tasted that bourbon, guess what, guys? That is days gone by. And while some guys are still happy in producing that, we're not. We're leading that charge into where American whiskey is going. We know it's quality over quantity, and we do it every single day. Good stuff.
Proof is in the glass, isn't it?
I always say that. So I talk so damn much. I just shut up. We just drink whiskey. We just sit back. I'll put on a TV show. I'll tell you what's going on. Fireworks going off. Let's watch fireworks. Let's go. There's a close up.
We don't need to watch the hockey anymore. Tampa Bay have got that locked up. So.
Well, and guys, keep me on track with that match. I know I'll get yelled at if I go over time here. I know that match is important to you guys. I was in Sydney for a rugby union thing. That was the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. It was amazing. So,
I mean, the Warriors lost in extra time last night, so who cares about the rugby tonight? But
Roger.
Controversial.
By the way, I've watched footy and cricket a billion times. I still could not tell you guys one rule of any of those sports. I'm not sure if that's a sport you guys play down there, but it's weird. Michters Nelson Distillery, our second distillery. Okay, now this is really our brand home. And this, Shively is not open to the public per se. If any of you guys come to Kentucky, I will personally walk you through that distillery and show you everything, meet the whole gang. But Shively is really that brand home where we showcase and we really, really bring our fans, even people who are new to Michters. We don't just tell them what we do different. We show them what we're doing that's different. I sit here and talk all day long. Well, we do this, we do that. It's so good. Well, show me, John. Guess what? This is our chance to actually show you what we're doing. Located in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. It's across from the world's largest baseball bat, the Louisville Slugger Museum. So if you have too many of them, too many RTDs that you guys love down there, guess what? Look for the big bat and just walk across the street. That's where Michters Fort Nelson is, okay? Once you walk in the doors, you're actually going to see this amazing still operation. Now, in terms of size, not amazing, but what's really, really cool, if you look to the right, that pot-to-pot system, also custom built by Vendome at Louisville, Kentucky. That was the last still system that was actually being used in Michters, Pennsylvania. So we've actually brought that back to life, that piece of history, and that is distilling daily at our Fort Nelson distillery. Also, if you look far to the right, you'll see those Cypress wood fermenters. Those are original as well. Cypress wood is an endangered species of wood. You can no longer harvest it, use it, log it. But guess what? We got it right here, back to life. That's something that's really, really cool. But again, it's pot to pot now. It's not that continuous still. We're focused on heads, hearts, and tails. You got to really, it's much, much different in terms of how you make that whiskey, because you have to really focus on making sure you're getting your cuts exactly right. And what I mean by cuts is, for those guys who may not know, it's making sure that part you really want that tastes really good, that's not going to kill you. You're getting that part and putting that into a barrel. But totally different way of making whiskey. But again, so cool for us, I think, to bring this piece of history back to life here. Guys, way too much talking. Let's do some drinking. Let's go. Come on. Now, US1 Sour Mash. Oh, I love this whiskey. Let's talk about it. Let y'all pour that US1 Sour Mash. Did you guys already pre-pour? Or is people pouring now? I'm like buying time. I'm trying to like...
Probably a bit different. I've pre-poured most of mine, well, the core range anyway. Just sort of let it.
See, I knew you were smart.
Breathe a bit, but yeah.
So guys, our US1 Sour Mash, number one, the name itself, right? You always have people who say, well, I know bourbon, I know rye. What is sour mash, right? That's why I love this whiskey, because from a sales perspective, it always creates conversation. It creates conversation for a bartender. It creates conversation from a guy at the liquor store going, the hell is sour mash? Is it like a sour beer? Like, what is this? First of all, 43% ABV, 5 to 7 years old. This is not a bourbon. It's not a rye, because there is no grain above 51%. To be a bourbon, got to be 51% corn. To be a rye, 51% rye. There is no grain above 51%. Now, the name sour mash alone, sour mash is a process, okay? And sour mash is when you take previous fermentation and you add it to new fermentation. That's sour mash. That is the sour mash process. But because this can't be called a bourbon or a rye, we simply call it a sour mash whiskey. Fun fact, every whiskey you have tasted tonight, and about 98% of all American whiskeys, are sour mash whiskeys. Mm-hmm. Everyone uses that same process because when you take previous fermentation and add it to new fermentation, it's great for a healthy pH balance for that yeast to inoculate and really start to create that alcohol. It's also great for continuity. It's like sourdough bread. It's like a starter. It's how you start the next loaf. That's what sour mash is. But for this whiskey, the thing I love about it is the fact that it's kind of it truly is the best of both worlds. You're getting this kind of sweetness from bourbon, but also a drier kind of note from rye. And it's like this perfect bridge between both. And you guys, some of you may be familiar, and sorry that it's an online retailer, but this award was amazing. The Whiskey Exchange in London, they named this their 2019 Whiskey of the Year, the first time an American whiskey has ever won that award. I think it's pretty cool that when you're in Scotland's backyard in London and you're beating them at their own game, I think there's something that's very, very humbling about that, and we're very, very proud of that. But this whiskey to me is just something that's very, very special. Any questions about the whiskey? I'm just talking, guys.
Well, it tastes like an everyday whiskey, and it's too easy to drink, apparently, which I have to agree with. Yeah, it definitely stands out. That real sort of tannic finish, but it's got that real tart sweetness as well. I feel like you could definitely pick this out of the lineup if you're doing it blind and had some practice, but yeah, the sour mash is pretty cool.
Yeah, and at 43%, you know, you're not getting this beast, you know, but you're not getting this baby either. And that's really our, like, if you're looking for a big punch you in the face, guys, like, I'm sorry, if you had a rough day and you just really need you got me something strong. Well, guess what, guys? We might not be the whiskey for you that day. We're not trying to punch you in the face or knock your head off. We're trying to invite you back for a second drink. You know, we want you, I mentioned Kentucky Hug, right? I want you to come back. Come on back now. Here, that's Kentucky. I want you to come back. And that's what our whiskey's, that rich viscous. You know, you got taste buds all the way down your throat. I want you to get every bit of that all the way down to your stomach without having to go, oh, hell, I'm burning up over here. I love this whiskey. What's really funny is where sour mash whiskey, the name on the label really came from, was back in the 70s and 80s. Like I mentioned, and I told you guys that rye was a dead category. And if you were in the industry, the big joke would be this. If you were walking down the street with your colleague, you'd see a hearse, you know, with a casket in the back. You go, oh, hey, look, there's a rye drinker. Because it was just such a dead category. So what the distillery said, what the hell we do? They said, oh, we got it. We'll lower the mash bill below 51% rye, and that way we don't have to put rye on the label. We'll call it sour mash. That's how it happened, guys. And to me, this is really our homage back to that whiskey, that style of whiskey they were making in Pennsylvania. It's why I put it right here in the presentation, because it followed up that still system that I mentioned was making this type of whiskey actually in Pennsylvania. But this is really us kind of paying homage back to again, our roots, not just 1753, but even to the 70s and 80s. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple comments about just the cherry notes coming through on that one. Have to agree, just those red cherries on that. Yeah, definitely works in that whiskey.
You will never hear me say you're wrong. Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. Good stuff, guys. Again, I mentioned, guys, if you get lost, too many Michters, guess what? Look for the biggest baseball bat in the world. It's right there. 300,000 people. You know, for Kentucky, you know, the big joke here is we have more barrels of whiskey aging than people. To have 300,000 people come to look at a big old baseball bat, it's pretty awesome. And we're right across the street, so we get a lot of foot traffic that comes in, checks out our distillery. Now, one thing I want you to see here, guys, yes, we offer tours and tastings, sensory experiences. I mentioned 20 barrels, right? That small batch. And that's, again, everything's thought through. And to me, this is kind of cool. If you look at each wall here, it's the equivalent of 20 barrels on each wall. And our equipment, guys, we're like, yeah, he's just saying that. Then they do something else in the back. Guys, our equipment is not designed to handle more than the equivalent of 20 barrels. And I say equivalent because evaporation and angel share, it's not always exactly 20 barrels. It might be, 22 barrels or 23 because of evaporation. But the liquid from full 20 barrels is all our equipment can actually handle itself. So to me, that's just really cool. We have retail, of course. Yeah,
sorry, John, what is the sort of evaporation rate?
Great question. So here in Kentucky, you lose 10% immediately. It's gone. Mm-hmm. And there's a famous brand out there, starts with a J, it ends in M-Beam. They got a SKU called the Devil's Cut. Guess what? He don't give it back. So he goes to the wood, you don't get that back out, right? You lose 10% immediately. On average, if you're not heat cycling, about 2.5%.
Okay.
Here at Michters, we're almost doubling that, and we'll talk about that.
And you say heat cycling, is that you're moving the barrels around the warehouse?
No. So heat cycling is literally heating the warehouse. You're steam heating that warehouse. And you actually are going to, what we do is we heat that, during the colder months from October to March, when it's Kentucky's crazy. The swings in temperature here are just nuts, right? It's 40 degrees today, and literally tomorrow it could be like snowing. It's insane here in Kentucky. But during colder months, we actually steam heat. We hold for a set temperature. No, I can't tell you what temperature. And then we actually we open windows, louver vents, and we naturally cool that warehouse back down. We're imitating kind of Mother Nature during those more normal months of summer and spring when your whiskey has a potential to go dormant. And when I say dormant, it means that whiskey's in the barrel, but it's not working with the wood. It's sleeping. We don't allow our barrels to go to sleep. Our barrels work every single day. They don't go on holiday. Every single day that barrel is expanding, contracting, because that's how you pull all of that flavor and color from that barrel.
And
Why didn't everybody do that, John? If it's so good, how come everybody didn't do that? Hey, T, tell me why, how come they don't do? Because you lose so much more whiskey. We always say Michters has the happiest angels in the world, because guess what? The most angel shares coming off because we heat cycle that warehouse. We're not the only ones that do it, but very few do. Okay. Sorry, buddy.
And at what strength is the spirit going into the barrels?
Man, you guys don't want to see the rest of my slides, do you? I mean, I promise. Let me get to an infographic that shows it perfectly, because me talking about it, you'll be like, what the hell is this guy talking about? There's a graphic that actually shows it perfectly. It's a great question. And it's probably the one thing I would ask you to walk away from today. Forget about me, please. But barrel entry is probably the number one thing that Michters does that has the greatest impact in terms of the quality of our whiskey. And we'll talk about why and how that happens. Okay. More questions? Keep going.
That's it for now.
Great. We'll guys. And then to follow up, something I think is really cool. After your tour, we invite you up to a world-class bar, the bar at Fort Nelson, for a simple cocktail. We actually allow you to make this like simple cocktail. It's really cool. I used to be that guy. I was like, well, sorry. It's 2021. I shouldn't even say this, but my mentality years ago was stupid. Still is. But cocktails are for girls. Cocktails are for people who can't handle the strength of whiskey. They ain't tough enough. Well, guess what? They're wrong. And so, this really exposes a larger demographic who isn't a straight whiskey drinker, that guess what? You can really take whiskey, bourbon and rye, and really take it a number of different ways. You can make it sour, sweet, bitter, all kinds of different things. So it's really cool that we expose people who are, don't know about cocktails or don't drink cocktails to how good they can actually be. The ice program here is amazing. Classic cocktail. Our classic cocktail menu was curated by Dr. Dave Wandrich, the foremost expert on American cocktail history. Again, nothing's overlooked here. This is not a Disneyland experience. This is very much a real world-class bar. It's not like you walk in, it's like, hello, well, you must drink Michters. Only like that's not how we do it here. They're amazing cocktails. Everything's thought through, and it's a great experience. And I hope you guys actually get a chance to come here, because I'm going to meet you there for about 5 drinks, I promise. Farm and grain operation, like I mentioned, we're growing our own corn, rye, and barley. Extremely hard to do because we are very, very picky about what we actually rejected the first 2 corn crops, and rye really doesn't grow that well in Kentucky. It grows better in the north. Think about that, right? Rye whiskey was the most dominant spirit before Prohibition up in the colonies in Pennsylvania. In the north, that's where rye grows. Guess what? Kentucky grows great corn. That's where that great transition happened. Corn was cheaper, easier to work with, wasn't as sticky in those big fermentation tanks, all this stuff. That's where it all happened. But again, it's fun because we're learning a lot. No, this will not replace where we are getting our own current US1 grade corn, rye, and barley. But for single estate stuff that comes off the Fort Nelson stills, we're looking at maybe some special releases to release down at Michters Fort Nelson. Okay. Dang, that boy can talk so much. When are we going to drink whiskey? Right now, we're going to do it. Come on, guys. US1 American. It's time. Everybody, 4th of July. It's about to kick off. God bless America.
So does all the celebrations start quite early over there? So it's the weekend?
Yeah, and I have 2 beast dogs who don't like it. Guys, seriously, I was like, okay, I got fireworks and I've got bear man dogs. They're huge Pyrenees lab mixes. I was like, something's going to screw up here. Yeah, they do. It started about 2 o'clock today, I think. Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty wild time, but hope everyone just drinks responsibly. You should too. US1 American, guys, really interesting whiskey here. By far the lightest expression that we have. It's 41.7%. 5 to 7 years old. We bottle by taste, not by age. If you look at this label, you see small batch. Yeah, I got that. But then right above American whiskey, you see the word unblended. That's where we want to focus, okay? Here's the weird thing about American whiskeys, right? These are all American whiskeys. So they're all American whiskeys, but then you have subcategories. You have bourbon, you have rye, you have sour mash, you have corn whiskey, malt whiskey, all these different subcategories. If you don't fall into one of those categories, you fall into a category called blended American whiskey. Well, blended American whiskey doesn't have the same rules as bourbon, rye, sour mash, blah, blah, blah. it only has to be 20% whiskey in the actual bottle. The rest could be grain neutral spirit or even vodka, basically. No offense to my Canadian friends, but if you drink Canadian whiskey, and yes, there is good Canadian whiskey, but the majority of it out there really is light in terms of whiskey, and it has a lot of grain neutral spirit. So you'll get this big nose, big initial kind of explosion of aroma, but then when you drink it, it really just like falls off a cliff. You're drinking vodka. Here's the problem. We don't blend. We don't put vodka or neutral grain spirit into this whiskey. Well, what's the rub here, John? We use some second use cooperage for our batches. So what I mean by that is we're basically taking our bourbon barrels, we are dumping out the bourbon, we're going to bottle that, but then we actually refill it. Well, guess what? One of those highly regulated rules of bourbon and American rye, you can't reuse your barrel. We are. There is some new barrels, but there are second use barrels. When you put that together, you cancel yourself out. You can't call yourself a bourbon. We said, yeah, but we're not blending. So we went to the TTB and we said, hey, this is 100% whiskey. As far as I know, we're the only unblended American whiskey in the world. And what I like about this whiskey, this is what I call my dessert whiskey. It's why I try to push it to the back, because I think that second use, once in virgin oak barrels, they really impart flavor quickly. It's like the old tea bag analogy. If I'm making or chewing gum, if I chew the gum first, I get lots of flavor. Blah, blah. If you chew my gum, don't do that. It won't taste as good. I'm not gonna have a lot of flavor. That barrel has really already been through a cycle. Well, a lot of those heavier oak flavors have been taken out. Well, guess what? Now it's time to pull those other layers of wood, those vanillas that are found lower in the wood, out and really have them be pronounced. To me, I get the one tasting note I will give you here. I get big butterscotch sweetness. As a kid, I ate these candies. They're so cheap. My grandparents had them all over the house. And this is what takes me back to being a kid. I know it sounds weird when I'm drinking whiskey, but those were good years. Those are good memories. That's where I'd go with this whiskey. And it's my dessert whiskey. It's perfect for after a great steak or something, but it's also great for a nice highball with a lemon twist. It's really, really a super versatile whiskey. Questions?
Yeah, that's definitely the old Werther's original for our part of the world.
I mean, I'm pretty sure my grandparents kept them in business. I mean, I don't know, like they were in every, like they were just like random drawers. They were everywhere.
Yeah.
Any questions, guys? Am I boring anybody?
Nah, just lots of comments, just pure vanilla. Everyone's enjoying it. Yeah.
Good. Well, and listen to, if you're into lighter spirits, this is perfect. If you're new to Michters, if you're new to American whiskey, don't start somebody off with, hey, try this cask strength bourbon. You're gonna love it. Don't do that. It's like giving someone a huge peaty Scotch whiskey for the first time, saying, taste this Scotch, it's delicious. It's not a good option. This is a perfect option to really break someone's mouth into those flavors that you're going to really find from Michters, and by the most part, American whiskeys. So,
So is there no one else really reusing barrels to sort of do innovative things like this? It's not really innovative for the rest of the world, but
the majority of distilleries are they're selling their barrels to Scotland. And that's why you see a lot of scotches that the color is big. It's almost like, what is this here? And not bashing it. It's just that after you use a barrel, and they say a Scotch barrel can last like up to 90 years. So that's a lot of uses. If you're making a 10-year or 15-year or 20-year malt, but you try to, your barrel is the number one cost associated with making whiskey. Number one, by far. And so you want to try and recoup as much of that capital as you can back. The problem is you don't get as much as you paid for it, and it's just not exactly the same thing. But the majority of them are being sold over to Scotland, Ireland, and even into Japanese whiskey as well.
I guess that's sort of the number one thing, right, that we hope will never change, is that bourbon can't reuse their own barrels.
I don't think it'll ever happen.
No, it wouldn't. I think the one thing that someone's made a comment here is that bourbon has got right is absolutely nothing else can be added to bourbon except for water. So we did I had a tequila tasting yesterday, and we're talking about the additives and things, and now it's quite a bit of a smoke screen of what can actually be added, and caramel and things.
I think this is a good point. And some people take me wrong when I say this. Guys, listen, I don't drink just bourbon. I drink scotch too. I drink a lot. If it's wet, I'll try it. That's kind of my philosophy here, right? But the thing that really, when millennials was the big buzzword, and it's like, what the hell do they want? How do we market to these people? What do they need? Bean bags, make it cool. Yeah, is that cool? Is that good? In the end, my belief was this. It's the same thing that I saw at restaurants where people were coming in, and for the first time I was hearing, from what farm are you buying the beef? Are you buying it from old Johnson's farm? The vegetables, the carrots, they're fresh. They're the best. People really care about what they're putting in their body. They want to know the story. They want authenticity. I think that is what millennials really want. I think it's what everybody wants. They want the real story, not just smoke and mirrors, not a bunch of sugar being added to rum and things like this. Or I digress. There's categories out there that don't have a lot of regulation, but it's true. It's real. When you spin a glass of bourbon, know that is telling you something. That is not caramel coloring in that glass. It can tell you approximately how old is this bourbon, how old is this American rye, and what strength. Is it really dark? Could be a really old bourbon, really strong bourbon, but it really can tell you the story because it's authentic. It's authenticity. Nothing's being added whatsoever. No flavor, no color, nothing but water. That's it. And so that's my soapbox on millennials. I'll stop talking about millennials. But yeah, it's interesting because I think people just care about what they're putting in their body. And I think that's why people are saying, well, wait a second. The world is now, almost everyone speaks English around the world. We're connected, and people are finally asking questions. People who think they knew what bourbon was, they're trying different. They're not afraid. I love steak, but I don't eat steak every day. I like pasta too, and variety is the spice of life. So to mix it up and try new things, that's something I've seen that's changed. 15 years ago, people wouldn't talk to me. Bourbon? No, I know bourbon. Jim Beam, I'm out of here. Bye-bye. It's not, man. I promise it's not. And today, that's really what's happened. People have really turned on to it and asked questions. And again, it's fun. It's approachable. So anyway, yeah. Let's talk questions, comments. How are we on time, guys? Everybody okay?
Yeah, I think we're doing all right. I'm actually not sure, but if we're on the last two, then we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I'll be brief here. We have talked about some of this, but these are the 6 things that we do different. They're not all secrets, not all proprietary. We're not the only ones that do some of these, but I don't know of any distillery that's doing all of these. That's the key thing here. Number 1 is just the wood itself. That virgin oak barrel, you have to season or dry that barrel one way or another. The super cheap way of doing it, you throw it into an oven called a kiln. You dry that wood really quick. You got a barrel, right? You could also put it out there and season it in these yards. And why we call it seasoning, it goes through all the seasons: rain, snow, heat, cold, hot, all of them. And it goes through this breakdown of the actual wood in microflora, which is a natural bacteria that's in the air. It actually helps to break down these more astringent flavors, these tannins that are great for wine, but not good for whiskey. Helps to break those down and really soften that, make it more porous, make it more easier. I'll dumb it down. Easier to pull it flavor out of the barrel. It's better, right? Here we go. And the longer you wait, the better that's going to be. Industry standard, 3 to 6 months. We're waiting a minimum of 18. So 18 months just for the barrel to be constructed. We've gone as long as 5 years to wait for that barrel to be ready. The longer you wait, better your barrel's going to be. How come everybody doesn't wait 18 months, John? If it's so good, time is money. When you're waiting 3 times as long for something that already costs more than everybody else's, guess what? It's not. We don't report to shareholders. We report to a family. And that's where it really is different. Joe doesn't care about his yield. He cares about the whiskey. How does the damn whiskey taste? I've actually heard that said by Joe. He doesn't care about you. He wants to know, is the whiskey the best it can be? Do you need something else? Here you go. Get it, Dan. but 18 months for just the wood to actually be prepared to be made into a barrel. After it's ready to go, 18 months, we toast and char. By law, you have to char that barrel. But we toast before we char. Why do we do that? Toasting is, no, charring is seconds. You're igniting that barrel, you're catching it on fire. Toasting is low and slow. It takes hours. You're heating that barrel up. And the way I describe this is if you hop into a shower or to a bath, right? So what happens is the pores in your skin, that warm water dilates your pores. Same thing happens to the capillaries of the wood. It dilates the capillaries. It allows that whiskey, that white dog, to soak down in through the layers, the lignin layer of wood where you'll find vanillin, which is where you find vanilla, and these amazing flavors. 200 known American white oak has 200 known concentrated flavors that you can actually be identified. I mean, most people can name 10, 5, but there's a lot of flavor in that virgin oak barrel. We're almost building a highway for that whiskey to work itself down into that wood and extract that flavor. And think about this, when it's really hot in Kentucky, that barrel, that pressure is pushing that whiskey down into the capillaries. When it cools off at night, extracting it back into the middle of the barrel. Think of a barrel as just a lung. It's all it does all day long. I mean, you can't see it, but that's what's really, that's what's happening. If you check out this picture, I love this picture because this is perfectly the example here. And that line on the right, that toasted and charred barrel, you call that the red line. And that shows you how far that whiskey worked down into that wood and caramelized right there. The question is, well, if you char, will the whiskey get down to that level? Yep, it will eventually. It takes time. Mm-hmm. We are setting that barrel up to be a highway to almost immediately go down to those layers and start extracting almost immediately. Big difference. And again, the problem is when you toast and char, you're adding about $50 US more to your barrel cost. That's why some people just can't afford to do it. We're not the only ones that toast, but very few do. Any questions? There's also hundreds of toast profiles. You can go with a lighter toast, not as long, not as hot. You'll get more of a honey type flavor, or you go even heavier. You get these like mocha flavors, dark chocolate. It's really amazing. And that's where Andrea Wilson comes into play because she really has worked with those cooperages, understanding the effect that toasting is going to have on the actual finish of the whiskey. We have a lot of projects and innovation you guys will never hear about because it doesn't turn out good. It gets rejected and that sucks, but it happens. We're not going to put something out unless it's absolutely perfect. But we are trying new things all the time. Not flavor of the week stuff. We're not looking over there at these guys saying, hey, they did that. People liked it. Let's do that too. We're not doing that. We're looking at true innovation, things that people haven't done. Where can we go? Where can we push this? That's what I love about the innovation at Michters. Okay. Questions about barrels, toasted, charring?
No, I was about to ask about what sort of level of toasting and charring. Is it still, I mean, the industry is like that 1 to 4, but obviously you just kind of blew that out with your hundreds of different
toasting, yes.
Levels, right?
Charring, yeah. Not as many. We use a char 3.
Yeah.
Standard char 4. Char 3 is the reason. It's simple. If we went to a char 4, you actually are starting to burn out the actual effects of the toasting. You're actually it's too much heat, it's too much burn. You're ruining. It's like wasted money basically.
Mm-hmm. So char 3 across the board.
Char 3 across the board.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep. One thing that does change is actually the length of seasoning. You know, our toasted barrel strength rye, 24-month-old staves, Bombergers and Shanks, which are some limited releases that we have, super allocated, 3 years for those staves. We're always trying new things, but we're always looking for a better experience for you guys. Mm-hmm. Man, are y'all ready for the big boy? It's a treat. Michters, not even US 1. This is Michters 10-year-old single barrel bourbon. Extremely allocated. The first week I was hired by Michters, I had a lot of phone calls, people saying, oh man, congratulations. I thought it was just going to be congratulations, but actually the majority of the calls were, hey man, it's awesome, Michters. Oh, so hey, can you give me that 10-year bourbon? Like immediately I was like, guys, I just got here, please. This is a special whiskey. If you came to my house right now, I would pull this out and say, welcome to Kentucky. This is what I think about this whiskey. And that's a big honor, 10-year bourbon here. This is to me, the gold standard of what a quality bourbon should be. Thing I want to tell you about this whiskey is number one, it's 47.2%. got a little strength to it. You know, this is that US. If you have any US 1 left, US 1 bourbon, this is the bigger brother. This is the bigger brother to the US 1 bourbon. Same mash bill, just a little bit older, a little bit more mature, has a little bit more to talk about, more experience. You know, has a nicer car, has a nice, better job. He's just the bigger brother. It's what this guy is. And the thing about our older expressions, our 10 years plus, you see 10 year on that label. To my knowledge, we've never released a 10-year-old bourbon. That's the minimum that this whiskey can ever be. We actually select from a range from 10 to 19 in terms of the age of that barrel. We have released an 18-year-old whiskey in a 10-year label. Why do we do that? Well, sometimes that barrel needs 18 years. Sometimes the barrel needs 10 years. Sometimes it needs 11 years. We bottle by taste, not by age. So, you know, you look at it and say, well, that's a little bit more expensive than some of these other 10-year bourbons I've seen out there. Yeah, you're right. But guess what? It's not 10 years in one day. You know, Joe always says, if I was the CEO of a publicly traded company, I'd be fired on day one, because you want to try and recoup your money as fast as you can, especially in whiskey. And if you don't have patience in whiskey, you can't be in this industry. You got to have it. But 10 years in one day, that's not us. This whiskey you're drinking right now, it's closer to 15 years. It's not 10, close to 15. And by the way, you know, with bourbon and American rye, you know, age statements are interesting, because if you are 4 years or older, you do not have to put an age statement on your label. If you're younger than 4, it has to say I am 3 years old. There is no minimum age for bourbon. It can be 10 seconds, but it has to say 10 seconds old. To be a straight bourbon, 2 years in that barrel. And to be a Kentucky straight bourbon, 2 years old with at least 1 year aging in Kentucky. It's a lot of different things thrown at you, but again, those weird kind of nuances. This whiskey right here, it doesn't need an age statement. We put it on here as a minimum. And again, it's that range of barrel between 10 and 19 years old. Our next label up is that beautiful 20-year bourbon back there. Mine almost gone. It's a shame. I'm about to cry. Any questions, guys? Single barrel.
Is that 20 year? Is that the oldest released?
So that is an 18.
Okay.
And I only drink it if friends come around. And guess what? I have a lot of friends during the pandemic year. So when you get some damn friends over here,
and when is New Zealand getting some?
Hey, you know what? I told you, we export every single whiskey that we distribute in the United States.
Just back on this 10, that's, yeah, I don't know, there's a few comments saying that they like it a lot. It's pretty impressive. I don't think it's different to anything I've ever had before. I'm getting a real sort of briny character out of it. But yeah, it's quite special.
Yeah, it's here's something that I love too. Guys, I've had 33-year-old plus bourbons that tasted like a liquid tree. Mm-hmm. You know, age is really just a number. It really is. You know, the effects of oak can I mentioned this. They happen quickly. So guess what? Some barrels, again, it goes back to those variables. For some reason, these are like whiskeys that are the exceptions to the rule. For some reason, maybe it's warehouse location. Maybe it's the temperature during that time period. That's what's crazy. Think about that, because it does have an effect on the barrels. That's going to lead to what that barrel does. And some barrels just age more gracefully. I don't know how else to say it, but they just do. And what's great is when you identify them at a young age. Our philosophy is that at 16 years of age, you really have to decide what's going to happen to this whiskey. Are the grain flavors going to continue to mesh with that oak nice and create that perfect symphony? Or is the oak monster going to come and start to take over and dominate, where you got to get that thing out of that wood immediately? It happens. It happens quick. So we're constantly monitoring our barrels. We're sampling very, very often, making sure that doesn't happen, because we just can't afford. We don't have a lot of this stuff. We can't afford to lose a barrel because we weren't paying attention. But 16 years old, you really got to start to decide what's going to happen to this. Is this going to make it to a 25? Because we actually have a 25-year bourbon too. Or is it ready to go now? And it could be. But that's really the secret kind of sauce behind our older age expressions. Questions?
I'm just going to jump in and say that this is one amazing whiskey. And straight away when I opened it and I poured it and I didn't smell it yet, I could already smell it just like a couple of centimeters away. The mouthfeel is outstanding, like fully coated. At the end of it, it's a little bit tacky, and also I do agree it does have that like kind of savory kind of finish to it. I just want to ask you how many bottles you have left, because I need one.
If you knew how hard this was to allocate for 64 export countries, I mean, that's like, I'm not playing. The crazy part is, and it's one of the most stressful things, because as much happiness as this whiskey brings people, you know, it brings me that much stress, because I have to decide where it's going to go and how much they get. And I'm like, oh my God. And so, I mean, there's literal countries who get nothing. And it's not because we don't, I don't have any more. These guys have done, the brand is on fire here. I have to give, I have to support these guys. We try to support people who support us. It's something we just do. If you guys drink more Michters, I promise I'll get you more 10-year bourbon. I promise. Just keep it going, please. I'll do whatever I can. Lingwan and Ethan are on here. That's our Asia Pacific team, and we talk quite a bit, and it's hard. It really is hard picking and choosing, and we try to go, again, it's quality markets. It's people who understand quality, who understand what we're about, not just because we're expensive, it's because of the actual quality of it. They get it. And it is very stressful, but again, it's an honor to actually be able to represent this whiskey. So I'm very proud of this.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to have some at the moment. We've not had it before. When we set up this tasting and put it online, these products actually made their way online, and within like an hour, someone was trying to buy more than we actually had even set aside for this tasting. So we had to put that guy on hold, and everyone in this tasting is at the top of the queue if you want some, but not everyone in this tasting can have one, that's for sure. But we'll get to that when we get there. Good
deal. Yeah, it really is. It's a special whiskey, and I'm glad you guys enjoy it. Like I said, come to Kentucky. I got a bottle here for you. I promise. All right, cheers. Guys, and this is kind of this is the thing. Even if you leave, give me a second here. This is the moment I want you to take with you, no matter what. You're getting close to the match, right? I can't believe I've done it again. Talked too damn much. Barrel entry. I told you guys, coming off the still in Shirley, it's about 69% ABV. Okay. By law, you cannot go into a barrel higher than 62.5%. So how do you get from 69 to 60? Water. You got to cut it down to water. Industry standard, 62.5%. We don't do that. We go in at a gold standard of 51.5. And what do I mean by gold standard? Prior to Prohibition, the majority of distilleries were putting their whiskeys into the barrel at 51.5% because the majority of whiskeys were actually being sold by the barrel. And they wanted something that was drinkable, palatable. It wasn't super strong. Well, if you go in at 62.5%, your ABV rises during aging here in Kentucky. Well, guess what? By then, you're 68, 69% ABV. That's a big, strong whiskey. It's not for everyday drinking, really. 51.5 after maturation, 5 to 7 years, you're coming out of the barrel with that ABV going up at about 55, 56. Guess what? Even our barrel strength whiskey, like I said, it's powerful. It shouldn't be aggressive. And we've adopted that gold standard. How come everybody do? How come, John? How come they don't do it? They don't do it over there. You can make good whiskey at 62.5%, but here is one of the greatest things, the byproduct that you get from going into that barrel at 51.5%. I mentioned that whiskey burn down your throat, right? That burn, Guess what? That's caused by something called polyphenols. And that's compounds that actually, it's from American oak, and it causes that burning sensation. Well, guess what? They have solubility. So when you're adding more water up front to the aging process, that water helps to break those compounds apart. Not all of it, but it will soften it. And due to evaporation, you get rid of that harshness. So I mentioned that Kentucky hug. We want you coming back for a second drink. That's what's leading to that quality in Michters. 51.5%. This graphic really shows what I'm talking about here. If you go, Michters on the left here, Standard on the right. And again, not bashing any other whiskeys, okay? This is just our style. We believe in it. We've tested it. We actually we actually do fill barrels at 62.5% just for in-house testing only. Never release it. I promise you the difference is unbelievable. I promise you, because water is this ultimate catalyst for chemistry. And when you're adding all that water up front, these wood sugars, these congeners, all these things, they interact better, they mesh better, they blend better, they mix better, they mingle better with water, not alcohol. This is something that's very hard for me to understand. I was like, whoa. You mean less alcohol in the barrel is going to be better? How? I thought more alcohol. Guess what? It's all about flavor. It's getting that flavor to work together, and water does that. And so if you look here at this graphic, we're going in a lot more water up front. And then in the end, what happens is when you go to dump these barrels, think about this for a second. Michters on the left, Standard on the right. If you're up at 68%, coming down to our US bourbon at 45.7 in the bottle, you got to add a lot more water to the bottle. That's the thing you don't think about. And this is what really made me get it. I was like, wait a second. There's more whiskey actually there's more 50% less water in our US 1 bourbon compared to an industry standard of the same ABV. That's the biggest thing that we do different. And it means you're getting a more concentrated whiskey in that bottle, but you're also getting that whiskey that's not fighting you. It's that whiskey that just keeps developing and opening up. And I guarantee that 10-year bourbon, if you get another 5 minutes, it's going to be that caramel is just going to bomb you. I promise. I love that whiskey. Keep coming back. I promise every whiskey has changed. That's what I love about these. But this is the number one thing that we do different. How come everybody doesn't do that, John? It's so good, right? So here's the problem. Because we're doing this, we're having to put down twice as many barrels compared to if we were going into the barrel at 62.5%. What's the number one cost associated with making whiskey? Your barrel. And guess what? When we first started doing this back in 15, Joe was like, hey, we shouldn't tell people. This is our trade secret. Willie Pratt, he said, Joe, you can go tell everybody. Go get on CNN, on top of go get an airplane, fly a banner. No one will do it because no one can afford to do it. 62.5% was established by accountants. Back in the 60s and 70s, they went away from the gold standard, not the actual gold, but the gold standard of 51.5 to 53% because they were dying. They were losing money. They're like, how do we save money? Accountant said, I've got it. Well, we'll increase the ABV on the barrels that way. That's where it all happened. We adopt the gold standard. We still do it today. Cost be damned. We feel like it has an overall impact on the quality of the wood or the whiskey. Excuse me. All right. I know it's super geeky, guys, but that's the one thing I just would say is like, all right, nobody's doing that. No one's doing it. We talked about heat cycling here. What's really cool though is this. Yes, the warehouses are heat cycled, but what's that mean, right? You're just hoping it gets hot and then you open the window. No. Every floor, every section of our warehouses, you'll see stainless steel probes that are actually in the barrels, and they have USB drives. And what we're doing, we're actually downloading with a data logger, we're actually downloading what's going on inside the barrel. We're building profiles of what's happening on every floor, north, south, east, and west, every section. So what's the goal there? Our goal is to maintain continuity across the entire house. I don't want the fourth floor or the third floor aging different than the first floor because it will happen. That's why our warehouses are 3 and 4 max. Once you go above 4, you start to lose the ability to maintain continuity. The 5th floor starts to get real hot. It just doesn't work for us. 3 and 4 is where we're at. Again, it's crazy. I haven't seen a lot of people doing that, but that's how we can truly look at things and say, whoa, hang on. It's super hot this week in October. We're not going to heat cycle. Guess what? You can do that. But we're building profiles of what's happening inside those barrels. Not every barrel, but every floor and every section. Sound good? We're super geeks, right? I love it.
I mean, you can talk about all you want, but until you see it on a pretty simple graph like that, you can't just like, oh yeah, I get it. Makes sense.
It's like, is this barrel having surgery? What's going on with it?
Take my money.
Well, I mean, I call our warehouses, the nurseries, because that's where the babies are. That's where the babies go. And like literally, it sounds funny, but Master of Maturation, Bourbon Mom, every bottle of 10-year bourbon that leaves our distillery, it's like, I know, God, it's romantic and cheesy and like, oh, okay, this guy needs to wrap this shit. It's like a child going, because even the employees, even we, like, there's years when I'm lucky enough to get samples and things like this, but like I don't buy a bottle because I know how limited this stuff is and I want as much exposure as it can get. But truly, some of these releases are like babies, and when you're releasing releases that are less than 200 bottles or less than 300 bottles for the world, it's really difficult. But it's pretty cool to, you know, to me, the attention to the accountability to quality that we show every single day is something I just don't see in every place. And again, not bashing the people. I think people are making great whiskeys out there, but it's all we're trying to do. So. And then, you know, one of the last things I'll talk about is filtration. And guys, most distilleries will not talk about filtration whatsoever. And number one, it's kind of boring anyway, right? But it's because typically a distillery will use a one-size-fits-all approach to how they filter their whiskeys. Not quoting every distillery, but the majority of them are using carbon. And nothing wrong with that, but carbon is like a black hole. It can remove all color, it can remove all flavor. They don't do that, but it's just not a great. There's better ways of doing it. And our whiskeys, every single whiskey you've tasted so far has been individually filtered, chill filtered in its own protocol. So our bourbon, rye, sour mash, American, 10-year bourbon, each one of these whiskeys has been filtered in a different way. And here's the greatest example I can give you. Well, why do you do that, John? Why don't you just do it all the same way? Well, here's the thing. If you look at a rye and a bourbon chemically, by the flavor compounds, all the oils, they're different. So it's kind of like if you walk into a bar, and some guys will say, oh, you shouldn't chill filter. Nope, we're going to put it on our label here in red, non-chill filtered. Yeah, all this. Guess what? That's great if you're making scotch. But if you're making American whiskeys with virgin barrels, it's not exactly like that, because we're not using a one-size-fits-all approach. I use the example of if you walk into a bar and there's all these big guys up at the bar, right? And you're this small guy and you're like, bartender, hey, I need a drink, I'm thirsty. They never see you, right? The same thing happens inside a barrel with these big chain compounds, these flavor compounds that are just dominant. They're huge. What we're trying to do here is go in and say, excuse me, sir, you, and you're out of here. There you go, sir. Going, and all of a sudden, these smaller, more subtle, nuanced flavors have this opportunity to actually be seen, be heard, experienced. That's what we're trying to do here. And to me, what that leads to is a more complex whiskey. And people, all these buzzwords, oh, it's round, balanced. And what that really means, guys, is you're not getting too much of one thing. It's complex. This is not just like corn. You're getting all these different things going on. That's because we're going in saying what protocol, what filters, what media, how many filters, which filter do we use for each whiskey? I don't know anyone who's doing this, period. Okay. And by the way, T, I'm gonna need I gotta see some ID on her before she drinks any of that 10-year bourbon. Okay, cool.
She's just starting early. It's what you guys do best in Kentucky, so we're gonna learn it this way.
It's a slippery slope, brother. You'll end up doing master classes at midnight on 4th of July. All right.
I'll just read you a few comments because there's a bit of chat about the 10-year-old and how good it is, really. Nice long finish on this one. Lingering banana and juniper notes for Nick. A lot of people agreeing with him there. Lots of people want to order the rye. Yeah, we'll get to that. Everyone picking up that banana notes. Everyone agreeing with the brine. 10-year-old, well balanced and ticks all the boxes for a bourbon. Really tasty. Lots of emojis. 10 out of 10 for the 10. That's definitely Phil from our Greyland store, just having a laugh. Yeah.
I love New Zealand.
Pretty impressive, yeah.
Guys, thank you.
What do you think of the bourbon?
I will give all credit to Dan and Andrea and our amazing production team, because they really are amazing. And thank you very much for putting up with me, and thank you for loving our whiskeys. Appreciate that. Almost finished, guys. One question I get a lot is, well, what's your entry level? we don't have an entry level. I mean, our US1 is our youngest whiskeys, but we put the same care and attention and detail into the production of those whiskeys as we do our older whiskeys. So our youngest whiskeys are US1s, but the main thing I'm going to say here is the fact that it's what we talked about. We don't do big volume commercial batches. It's small batch, true small batch, and single barrel. Every rye we produce is single barrel. We have no small batch rye. It is all single barrel. And when you run single barrel, and yeah, there's a lot of single barrels out there, and Blanton's was the first one, but single barrel has to be good and perfect every time. There's no crutch. You can't depend on this barrel to pick me up because it ain't that good. Help me. It's right there. It has to be perfect every single time. And with our rye, I think we are locked on 100%. And I really do love it. And I'm hearing a lot of comments about our rye, and that's I love it because it is making a big run right now. People are really turning on the rye, and they're turning to Michters Rye because, you know, it's like when you go out to a bar and you look down, you're paying $20 for a cocktail, and then you look at the whiskey and you're like, well, that's not a expense. Why am I paying $20 for this? I can stay at home and drink it a lot cheaper. That's what's happening here. It's almost like the food. Well, the farm and the carrots. Did you read Stories to the Cow before you killed it? Please tell me you did. And the thing is, with your consumers more connected and educated than ever before. They know when they're being taken, when a cocktail is way overpriced. They want something quality. I'll pay $20 I'll pay $20 for a cocktail. I want something that's $20 worth in the cocktail itself. That's kind of my soapbox there, but that's just kind of how I think people are that's where we're going. But again, we don't do this big commercial batch. It's 20 barrels per batch, single barrel only. That's it. And I think we're doing a great job. Barrel strength rye, guys. Put on your helmets. We're going to war, guys. Let's go. Barrel strength rye, US1. It's delicious. I hope you enjoy it. It's great. We do have our barrel strength rye, right? I hope we do. All right. Guys, barrel strength rye. It's like I said, I mean, this is the same whiskey as our US1 rye. It's just, it's not cut down. Every single barrel is going to range in ABV in terms of proof. I hope you're getting the experience here with this whiskey of, you know, a lot of people say, oh, barrel strength, cask strength. Let me put some water in it real quick. Or no, that's not for me. Well, I don't add water to a whiskey until I've tasted it. It's like salting your food before you tasted it. It's kind of the same thing. To me, this is that whiskey that you think is just going to hurt you, but it just wants to love you. And it just makes you want to get more and come back to it. And to me, rye is such a unique grain because it really is spicy. But again, I don't get tasting notes. But this thing takes me in a lot of different directions. I can get spearmint. Like it's just a very unusual. It takes me everywhere, and I love this whiskey. I hope you do. Hope you do. Any feedback on that one? It's the same age as our US1 rye, 5 to 7 years. It's just it is bottled at barrel strength. That's it. One of Pam Holland's favorite whiskeys that she ever produced was our barrel strength rye. Questions?
Dropping off a little bit. We've got some comments here. One of our staff member who bottled up all the samples today had a lot of pleasure doing so. So rich. I'm pretty sure we went through more whiskey than we're supposed to, but you know, we'll sort that out later. It's a lot smoother than I was expecting. Barrel strength rye is my number one in the slide. Gareth is being good, but I'm just gonna say it's fucking good. So yeah. Yeah, that's it's pretty cool.
It's awesome. Yeah, this is a special whiskey because, like I said, when you see barrel strength, when you see cask strength, a lot of people run, and I mean, this is one you shouldn't run from. You should stop and meet it. And this is, Andrea always calls our she says we have book bourbons. And that also really applies to, it just doesn't sound as catchy to our ryes, but this is a whiskey that you really want to spend time with. Okay. This is not a Tinder date. You're not swiping right here. You want to meet this in the old fashioned way, sit down and start talking about what's your favorite color, what's your favorite movie, get to know this whiskey. Because to me, it needs time to really open up and really let everything it has to offer really come out. And yes, I do recommend a drop of water after you taste it neat. That's how I drink. Again, it's what I think. You drink the way you want to. But when you add that drop of water, I really get a bigger nose and a lot of things I didn't really see without letting it set for a while. That's my experience with this whiskey. But I'm damn proud of this thing. This is an annual release. We try to bring it out early in the year, every year, just once a year. We actually had to skip 2020. We actually skipped 2020. We just didn't have our US 1 rye in such high demand. We didn't have enough whiskey to actually come out and say, we'll sacrifice our US 1 barrels to actually do a barrel strength. We just couldn't do it. We need every barrel of US 1 we could. So questions, comments? I love y'all's comments. They've all been great.
Everyone's accusing Kyle of drinking too much of the samples. You've just touched on 2020 and obviously COVID around the world. How did it affect you guys and production-wise and things? Shut down the whole time?
Well, yeah. So when you are a what's it called? Like when you are a necessary employee or whatever, you're doing something for the world public. I forget. It's almost been that year.
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Service.
What is it?
Like essential service.
Yeah, that's right.
Essential. I had a paper. If I get pulled over, I was like, check it out. I'm essential.
Yeah, we were the same. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we didn't shut down because what's crazy is our demand actually went up. Look, when you're in lockdown, what else are you gonna do, man? I mean, I'm sorry, but there's not a lot to do. And our sales weren't hurt, but our friends in our, and that's what's funny is this is a whiskey business, but this is also a people business. And it's another thing I love about Michters is we don't look at as people's numbers. We look at them as real people, friends. And the reason I'm talking about this on this slide here is because the one thing that we did a lot of things. We made hand sanitizer. We did put in safety protocols with our distillery. I'm working from home. I'm about to lose my mind. I actually talk to my dogs like they're humans. But one thing we did was the world's 50 best bars came to us and said, "Hey, we're going to do a charity auction." And people are dying out here. Their livelihood's gone. And we don't do barrel picks. That's a big cool thing now. It's like, oh, I'm gonna do a barrel pick because I'm an expert. That's cool. We don't do it. We're not big enough. Sorry. It's our policy. But we said, you know what? We will auction off. We'll give up and auction off our first ever 10-year bourbon barrel pick. And we had no idea what was gonna happen. And look at that conversion, guys. Like how I did that. New Zealand dollar. So nothing's overlooked at Michters. I told you. It sold for over 290,000 New Zealand dollar, just the barrel itself. So in total, we raised over 380,000 New Zealand dollar, and that's a drop in the bucket for what really happened to people out there. But 100% of the proceeds went to the hospitality industry. It was our opportunity to stand with the people who've stood beside us and supported us since day one. So we're very, very proud of that. So that's a way that it's impacted us. And actually, this barrel pick is actually happening next week. It's going to be the first time I've been back to the distillery since Shutdown. So, I'm fully back.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
And just for a bit of context for everybody, a barrel of Cardrona whiskey, which is one of our distilleries here, if you're looking at their sort of sherry barrels, that's about $22,000 a barrel to sort of buy one at the moment. So yeah, $290.
And that's good.
Is pretty awesome. Yeah.
Hey, that's good. I mean, we had no idea what was going to happen. It was
Well, it's not for charity. That's for personal consumption.
But I mean, we had no idea. Like, in one of my friends was actually like in the bidding war for this. He didn't win, but like it was cutthroat. It really was. And the guys who won it, they are like, they have been. We've had multiple Zoom meetings with them. You know, really setting this thing up to make sure their experience to come in and do this barrel pick is going to be perfect. They are some of the nicest guys I've ever met, and they are, yes, they're happy to get these bottles, but they are so damn proud that, you know, that money went to the people who needed it the most. And I cannot wait to go out to some of my favorite restaurants around the world and see my favorite bartenders again, and give people hugs and get back to something normal, I guess. But that's something that we did for people, and like I said, we're very proud of that and honored that we raised so much money. Last thing, third year in a row, Drinks International American whiskey, top trending American whiskey of the year. The thing I like about this slide is the fact that we are the most premium on this list. To me, I think that's something special. And then also in the same, you know, Drinks International, we were number 2 in the Bartender's Choice Award. Again, I think that's kind of cool because they basically asked the question to every bartender is, you know, if you had to have one spirit, what would it be? And we were number 2 on that list. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Not questions. Everyone just buying and selling, it looks like. But I have to say, I mean, that sort of charity thing is pretty awesome. We sort of forget over here, we've been out of lockdown, a few little scares and things, and kind of moved on. But your part of the world's kind of just getting there, and it's, yeah, getting out and seeing everyone and, you know, supporting your bars and customers and clients is sort of just like the next thing. And, you know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, well, and it's weird, you know, I'm a people guy. I like walking into my office. Well, you can tell. I like walking into my office and having that BS chat about the game last night and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, all the guys, 2 dogs staring at me. It's kind of strange. Or I'm on a Zoom call. And guess what? Zoom has been awesome because one thing we didn't do, we didn't close up shop and say, oh, this sucks. But we've actually gotten closer to our customers because a lot of times when we come to market, we're going so fast that like you don't have time to have these conversations, these sit downs, strategy. Let's talk about what's really happening. So it's kind of a blessing in disguise. Is like we kind of rediscovered our friends, and that's what I call our importers. You know, our distributors, our retailers, our bartenders, because we do care. You're not a number to us. You really are somebody, and that always factors into even the thing I love is this. It's like, well, Australia's always going to get more of the 10-year bourbon than we will because they have a lot more. Not necessarily, because there are markets that we have around the world, and we look at not just volume, but we look at the quality of placement. You know, where are we? You know, what listings do we have? Like, you know, these guys care about us so much. They put us in the best. All these things matter to us, but again, at Michters, everything is just this family environment. It really is a family. We fight like a family, but we love each other like a family. We're always there for each other like a family. I've done both. I've done corporate. I've been with a company that, excuse me. There are companies who are content with what they've done, and that's fine. I think there are companies that are looking forward to the future. And I think that Michters is changing the perception of American whiskey and also changing where the category is actually heading in terms of innovation. And that's why I'm so proud to represent this brand. This is not a job to me. I would do it for free. Don't tell Matt I said that, but it's the truth. And I just hope everyone had a really good time. I'm sorry for talking so much. I hope I didn't scare people too much. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And everything I said it's very true. I cannot wait to get back to New Zealand. You guys are like true gentlemen and true ladies, and very authentic. And you can see that immediately. So,
mate, it'll be great to have you down here. And I'm sure if everyone wants to jump off shortly and go watch the All Blacks, you can, but we can keep chatting for a little bit longer. It's nice to sort of hear from a sort of family-owned distillery and someone who's clearly deeply involved and quite into it. So if you don't get the whole marketing spiel and all that sort of stuff, and as you mentioned earlier, like tasting notes whatever. You're never wrong.
You're never wrong.
It's all pretty awesome. Yeah, it's all what you think of it, really. But I've got a couple more questions here, and you mentioned Mad Men earlier. So someone's asking, did you have to pay billions to be X's favorite whiskey?
So that's a great question. And so here's some background on and quick story. I will answer the question. I was in Warsaw, Poland, at a whiskey show. A guy comes walking up and he says,
Polish, by the way.
Dziękuję. So guy walks up, he says, billions. And I said, oh my God, you saw that. And so I went on this 2-minute ramble about how it happened. And then I just stopped and I was like, and he goes, billions. He didn't speak a word of English, but I told him how it happened. Okay. I don't care because he said the word billions. He saw our brand. The family is New York based. They're in New York, and the prop master and the writers, they wanted the show to be as accurate as possible. So they literally went to Wall Street bars and they were going in saying, what do you guys drink? Like, oh yeah. And like, they were doing kind of the same things that the guys in the show were doing. They're animals, right? So they were like drinking like Celebration in 25 years. Like what they tried to make the show as real as possible. So no, it organically happened. I have to be careful saying this, but we've had the cast and crew down, and they are awesome. And if you haven't seen that show, please watch it. It's really, really cool. They really do love the whiskeys, and they still like Joe is like the coolest guy I've ever met in my life. He talks to professional athletes and like movie stars, and like like people just genuinely like Joe. He's this amazing guy. He really is, and it's authentic. But no, it organically happened, and that's a true story.
Yeah, it was pretty much my weekly reminder to James is when I'd catch up on billions and just like, James, what are they drinking? Why haven't we got that here? So, yeah, nah.
I got one bottle over here. We can go to the bar and start acting like those guys.
Don't worry, we'll be there soon.
$1,000.
Yeah. All right. Well, if there's any other questions, I don't know if I'll unmute everyone or if everyone's hang around. But yeah, John, thanks for taking time out. Must be about nearly midnight.
Man,
yeah.
I've got a brisket. I've got to smoke for 2 hours, then crank it up and then cook it for another 7 hours. So guess what? I might watch the match with y'all. I mean, who knows, man? I don't know.
Just tune in.
Good deal.
Great.
Guys, absolute pleasure. I hope everyone enjoyed. I really do. I hope you enjoyed the whiskeys more than anything. And if you guys have follow-up questions, appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate you. I can't believe you guys give me 2 hours. That's really awesome of you guys. That's very kind.
Easy. And everyone, just quickly, we'll send out an email, but in terms of the product available, the core range, so your US 1 range is all pretty readily available. The 10-year-old and the Barrel Rye, the last two that you tried, we just drank half the stock for the entire country. So if you're wanting some of that, just send us an email or a text or a call just to anthony@glengarry.co.nz. But we'll follow up an email and we'll sort of see who's keen and sort of allocate it or ballot it sort of that way. And hopefully James and John now can suss us a bit more and everyone can get a bottle. But yeah, we'll talk to you all soon. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, T.
Any other last questions? Everyone's just saying thank you, enjoyed it so much. Great presentation. So yeah, thanks, John.
You're welcome. Cheers, guys.
I don't know how unusual.
T, there is more of the barrel strength and 10-year-old coming in, but they're probably 6 to 8 weeks away, I think.
All right, cool. So we'll touch base if everyone wants it. We'll sort of, we don't do it, but we'll take some back orders. And Araha, I hope the bourbon made you feel better.
She did, yeah. Very, very warm. No, that was amazing. Thank you so much, John. And I think, the lineup truly stands in testament to what you said at the start of the tasting with the quality, and the distilleries aim to be, the best bloody distillery in Bourbon. So really on your way. Maybe you're probably already there. Those last two especially stand in testament with that. So all I can say is well done and don't stop doing what you're doing because it's bloody good.
Thank you very much. For a guy who literally, when I first started, I was 25 years old and I was a kid. I didn't know anything, and I just knew that I love bourbon, and I was like, how come they don't? and today, just by being persistent and really making people understand and kind of taking people's hands and walking them through and saying, guys, it can be as good as the best scotches and cognacs out there. That's what I love. There are people who I've met who will never tell me they like my whiskey, but guess what? One thing I've learned to do is watch eyebrows, because when they drink a whiskey, I see the eyebrows go up and I'm like, gotcha. Even if they won't tell me they like it, I'm like, I know you do. You don't have to say it. But yeah, thank you so much. I really do appreciate the awesome feedback, and I will always let Dan and Andrea and our team know the great work they're doing, because it's being experienced around the world. Thank you.
Too many dogs. Hey.
Good stuff. All right.
All right. We'll all kick on. French
All
Bulldog.
good? Oh man, my dog would take up the whole screen. He's a beast.
We can't have a Zoom tasting without a little pet show off. So.
Well, and real quick, I'm actually getting
Can you hear me, John? Can you hear me, John?
Jack.
Hey, awesome, man. I've carved a whole oak barrel stave while I've been listening to you.
Seriously?
Yeah. Yeah, remember, mate, we're sitting in the shed.
Damn it, you Kiwis are amazing.
Oh, he's been
awesome.
taking the clothes. He's been taking the clothes off the line. Yeah. Cheers, mate. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it, man.
Send me a case of that old Bourbon Rye, the last one. Thanks.
Roger that. We'll do. On the
I'll
way.
come and get it. Cheers.
Cheers, man. Anthony, the last thing I was going to tell you is, was doing this worldwide or this 4 seasons, so many big time big wig people on this masterclass, right? And my dog is sitting there just howling at me, just going, "Roar, roar," like, take me outside now. And I'm thinking that I think I mute myself, and my dog's name is Lou after Louisville, and I go, Lou. Matt, my boss, is on the call. And he's just dying laughing because I have no idea that I'm just screaming in everyone's ear. So that was awesome.
Yeah, it's funny. Karina, that little puppy's pretty cute.
I love dogs more than people.
Yeah.
You guys are pretty cool.
I've been home by myself, and for that first half of that tasting, I could just hear both of them just barking constantly outside. And it's like, should be going to tell them off, but couldn't leave.
Liz, did you enjoy it?
Here's Otis.
This is Otis. There you go, John. You've got a cat as well.
All are welcome. All are welcome.
Yeah, that was really cool tasting. Thank you. Really, really cool.
Good. Glad you guys enjoyed it. Guys, have a wonderful Saturday. I'm going to go prepare for my Saturday. You guys have been awesome. And like I said, if you have any questions, James, Anthony, Lingwan, Ethan's on here. There's someone who's always available for all you guys on every time zone. I don't sleep. We're here for you, okay? Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Go.
4th of July.
See you around later.
Cheers.
Bye.
So yeah, thank you.